So on this Sunday before Christmas Eve, we read from the account of the birth of Jesus as recorded for us by Dr. Luke. This is how it puts it. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." And suddenly a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angels, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, heaven and on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests." The angels had left them and gone into heaven. The shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off, and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all that they had heard and seen, which was just as they had been told. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. It was a song that almost never came to be. For when Kim Gannon first pitched the words to the record company executives, they turned it down because they thought the final line was just too sad for many folks with loved ones in the military. But then Gannon happened to be playing golf one day with a rather famous singer, and when he shared it with him while on the links, that man decided to record it. He did so on October 4th, 1943, soon released by Decca Records as a 78 RPM single. Now, for the benefit of Mike and others that may not know this, this was long before tapes and CDs and MP3 files and Spotify and streaming services. Recordings were made of glass or vinyl, and they were classified by how fast, how many revolutions per minute that they spun around the turntable. Now, in our home, they were also classified by how many scratches they had on them, and how long you could make it go before you just couldn't take it anymore, had to throw it out. This record went on to win Bing Crosby his 5th gold album. It lingered in the top 5 songs for 3 months after it was released. In England, the BBC banned its broadcast because they feared it might lower the morale of the British troops. But the American military brass said, no, actually, it's accomplishing more for the morale of our forces than anything else. So they put it out on their own album, and it quickly became the most requested song at every USO concert. Even 22 years after it was written, in December of 1965. Astronauts Frank Borman and James Lovell asked that it be played by the NASA ground crew while they orbited above the Earth in Gemini 7. There's something enduring indeed about the words of Gannon's song that touches almost all of us, even today, 73 years after it was first written. Now, there's clearly some unrealistic demands being made in this song. While we could probably find mistletoe and put presents under the tree, asking us to please have snow here in South Texas, even on a day like this one, is beyond our abilities to pull off. Unless, of course, it's the fake kind of snow that they had at Siena yesterday for the Frost Fest being held while it was 80 degrees outside. What's more, sometimes when folks do have snow, that is the very thing that prevents them from being home at Christmas. as countless movies like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles have shown. Still, when Christmas comes, almost everybody would probably like to be home, or at least to have their loved ones home with them. Then I rather suspect that a young couple by the name of Joseph and Mary would have liked to have been home that first Christmas as well. Especially given Mary's pregnancy, nobody in their right mind would have wanted to travel by foot the 70-plus miles across rather rugged terrain. You can see some of it from Nazareth way up in the Galilee, down across the Jordan on the other side of it because nobody went through Samaria, to get to Jerusalem and then to go beyond it south to the little town of Bethlehem. Joseph and Mary made this trip because they were required to do so, compelled by the autocratic decree of a Roman Caesar far away who called for a census simply in order to update his tax rolls. What's more, contrary to the custom of the time, which based taxation on residency rather than ancestry. Augustus had even required that if you had property elsewhere, even a minute interest in it, or you just had family elsewhere, that you had to go there too. And so Joseph and Mary, who may never have even been to Bethlehem in their lives before then, because really, why would anybody go there? Even Micah knew that the town of Bethlehem was small and unimportant. A tiny little place, not even big enough to raise up one battalion of one ephah of fighting men. Why would you go there? But Joseph and Mary had to make the trip. That sounds unduly burdensome. Maybe even worthy of a good bah humbug or something. Every year, Julie and I receive a royalty check from a little oil well up in Magnolia, Arkansas, that we've never been to. Her father acquired it decades ago from a law client who owed him money, I think. And when her parents died, Julie inherited 1/3 of it. Let me tell you, it is quite the income producer. Last year, the check was for $78. It cost more to get it onto my taxes than it does for that. But at least we've never had to go to Magnolia, Arkansas in order to see it for ourselves or to be registered. Now, who knows what Joseph's interest was in Bethlehem? Probably very little, rather insignificant at best. But when they got to that little town of Bethlehem, there was no hotel or public inn to check in. They didn't have a Motel 6 or a Red Roof Inn or a Best Western or even a Best Middle Eastern. There was nothing there. Not even a roadside pandokion, which is the Greek word used for a place like the Good Samaritan took that wounded robbery victim to. No, there was just, Luke's word, a kataluma there, which was a guest room in somebody's private house. You can see it, it's an upper room usually. The downstairs had the storage, the inner courtyard, and the room that the patriarch or the owner lived in. This was most likely a distant relative of Joseph, but a man whom Joseph had probably never actually ever met. And the kataluma was already taken by somebody else who got to town before them, no doubt because they weren't traveling with a pregnant woman. I'm virtually certain that Joseph and Mary would have preferred to have been home that first Christmas, not stashed out in a stable behind a stranger's house, stranded in a distant and displaced place. Likewise, those shepherds, they would have probably rather been at home as well, don't you? Don't you think? It may not have been a snowy and cold night, such as our common imagery of Christmas suggests. In fact, Jesus may actually have been born sometime in the spring of the year, not the bleak midwinter, though it makes a great song. But there was still probably a good night chill in the fields at Bet Sahor, just outside of Bethlehem. You can bet that the ground would have been just as hard to sleep on, if you could sleep at all, that is. Not have to keep a lookout all night long for wolves and even human predators who were ready to kill or steal their flock. The life of a shepherd was a very hard one. Even when they did get to go into town, nobody much cared to be around them. They had a bad reputation. People thought they were thieves and liars, probably because many of them were thieves and liars. And if you spend a lot of time around sheep, well, you start to smell like them too. The shepherds would have liked to have been home that evening. But then again, some of them probably didn't have any homes to actually go to. There are many today who live like that too. We may think this morning of all the refugees in this world, estimated by some counts to be 11 to 12 million, but by the UN now to be as many as 17 million refugees in the world. Either way, that's a dramatic increase from the mid-1970s when there were just 3 million refugees in the world. But in addition to those numbers, there's another 33 million folks in a wholly different category known as internally displaced persons. Not technically refugees because they have not left their own country, but they're refugee-like inasmuch as they've been displaced from their homes by persecution or by armed conflict or by natural disasters in places like Syria and Colombia and Nigeria and Turkey and Iraq. Put it all together then, along with the 1.2 million people who have actually submitted claims for asylum somewhere, it's more than 50 million people today. Half of them children. The highest number since the Second World War. Most of them are not Christians. But I have no doubt but that they would love to be home for Christmas as well, if they had any idea what that meant. Clearly, we live in a world in which, as one official has put it, peace is dangerously in deficit. But then beyond even all of that, I have a feeling that there may even be some of us right here this morning who may have a house but still be longing for a home. Well, like those shepherds of old, we don't quite know where to find it either. The great Christian apologist and writer C.S. Lewis spoke of this when he suggested that we all live in the shadowlands. It's a metaphor that he borrowed from Plato to reference this world, which is not the world as it should be, nor the world as it will be, but rather the world as it is. A land of shadows and light, illusions and reality, disappointments and defeats, sometimes even a veil of tears, as Jesus himself experienced it. Yet intuitively, we know there is something better. A place that is more real and more true, as Eric Metaxas has echoed Lewis. We long for it, and we hang on to every hint we can find of it, like nuggets of news from our hometown when we're far away from it. Because our citizenship is in heaven. Our hometown is with Jesus, who is also our passport to that very place, to the better country, as the writer of Hebrews once put it, to the city that the great architect has built for us, a home not made with hands. And until then, we are called to preach a gospel of homesickness. For even if we find love and fun and joy along the way, and we should, and we find pleasant ends in which to stay, and we will, we should never mistake them for home. See, like the prodigal, we have a Father who knows our deepest longings and is running and leaping to meet us before we even reach the inner gates. Listen to how Lewis expressed it in some famous lines from Mere Christianity. He said, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it to suggest the real thing. If that is so," Lewis said, "I must take care, on the one hand, never to despise or be unthankful for those earthly blessings, but on the other, never to mistake them for the something else of which they're only a kind of a copy or an echo, a mirage. I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall find after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of life to press on to that other country and to help others do the same." As one of our own members, Ronnie Thompson, said just recently in sharing with the women in her Bible study group here, she said, "Sometimes we're all just walking each other home when it comes to this life. Only it may cost us something to do that. It costs God his own Son, whom he sent at Christmas, to bring us all home one day as well." Let's go back to that song which Kim Gannon wrote and Bing Crosby made famous, and now Josh Groban sings incredibly well. A few months before Gannon penned those words in 1943, the chaplain of the U.S. battleship North Carolina, a man named E.P. Woobens, he knew that the crew would be homesick. They were going to still be in the South Pacific during the holiday season. So he collected $5 from every crew member that had children back home. He made a list of all of the people that gave him money, and he sent that money along with the home address of each sailor to Macy's department store in New York City. The request was made for Macy's to buy gifts. This is the letter that he sent. Enclosed is a government check for $2,405, which we ask you to give us the following service. Select a Christmas gift or gifts valued at approximately $3 for each of the 729 children. It goes on from there. Also, the money was including for shipping it to them and for mailing costs and for a gift card. He wanted those gifts mailed to their homes in time for Christmas, along with a simple greeting from their father. As Christmas approached, the servicemen on the ship of the Carolina gathered for the annual Christmas show on board that involved skits and songs and entertainment. When the entertainment had ended, the chaplain had a surprise to reveal. For the folks at Macy's, when they received the money from the chaplain along with the list of the addresses, they thought that in addition to giving gifts to those military families at home, they should give a one-of-a-kind gift to those sailors as well. So since they had the addresses for all the sailors' homes, they reached out to every family. They asked as many of them as could do so to come to Macy's and to make a film reel to send to their loved ones who would not be able to be home for the holiday. They did so, and in turn the men aboard that ship sat there and on that Christmas day, and they saw on film their wives and their children and their loved ones appearing before them, sending them a Christmas greeting. According to one of the sailors that was on that ship, there was not a dry eye on board. Those rugged sailors watched, and they wept, and they rejoiced. Like the song, they were only home for Christmas in their dreams. But what made their home special was this Christmas gift they received on that December 25th in 1943. To round the story all out, you should know as well that after Gannon's death in 1974, he left the royalty rights to his song to the American Heart Association. And they've been benefiting from his generous gift ever since. Maybe you're longing for home this season. Wishing you could be with your loved ones. Wishing they could come and be with you. It may be the other year. If you're a grandparent, you know what that is. That's when the other family, the outlaws, get the kids. And you just sort of sit at home by yourself. Don't you hate that year? Yeah. Maybe the circumstances of your life, like those internally displaced persons of long ago, Joseph and Mary. Or those sailors on board that ship in the South Pacific in 1943. Or the military men and women who right now are stationed in far-flung posts across the earth. Maybe those circumstances have carried you far away from those you care about. Or maybe like some of those millions of refugees or those shepherds, you don't really have a home anymore. A place where you feel safe and secure and welcome. Or maybe, just maybe, like C.S. Lewis said, you're living in the Shadowlands, longing for a place you've never been. Whatever the case, may I tell you that the gospel of homesickness is for you this morning. We really can be home for Christmas, not just in our dreams, but in the assurance that one day we will walk into heaven where the love light truly gleams. And we'll spend this season with the very one who made it so wonder-filled in the first place. Bing Crosby sang it, but Jesus today says it. You can plan on me. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.